Hi, this is Frances Micklem, and again, I'm sitting here in one of I like to think of as a vegan triumph, home knitted sweater. This is one of the things you have to do when you do go vegan, is you have to think about the clothes you're wearing, and you need to be able to, and food you're eating, and be able to make the stuff you need for yourself. It requires a certain level, a certain increase in independence, and so I found this wool. Very nice it is too, and none of it is actual wool. Though you might say, gosh, it's a bit extreme. Wool, the sheep would be far too hot. Oh gosh, they'd suffer if the wool was left on them. But the problem always is uh, that it's when things are scaled up that the real problem occurs. So if you have your own little small holding, and you share the cow's milk with the cow's calf, and you carefully shear your sheep and make a jumper out of it. That's one thing. But as soon as you've got hundreds, possibly even thousands of sheep, the practices are become what I'd like to speak about today, which is what I'm calling the race to the bottom. So the race to the bottom of any sort of welfare, the race to the bottom of any sort of responsibility, or recognition of animal sentience. With wool, for example, they'll actually cut off the back of the sheep around the bum area, because that wool isn't going to be clean enough to use, and they also can get lice, and so then you have a situation where uh, they have like an open wound until scar tissue forms. Completely unnecessary, excruciatingly painful. So that's where I stand on wool. I can always, say, oh, this wool's fine, this wool isn't fine. But for me, I just avoid the grey areas. Now, the situation this week is that people are questioning whether animals are sentient. What sentience means is that that animals can suffer, basically, that they have senses and feelings and are able to experience fear and pain, and joy and bonding, and a whole range of important things that need to be recognised. If they're not recognised, we can descend quite quickly into a situation that there was, say, in France for a long time, where animals had the same legal standing as furniture, merely property. And so that's obviously a horrendous thought for many people. And the main problems are that it is this scaling up. So we have thousands and thousands of animals in difficult situations. So take the farm animals to start with. They weren't mentioned on the news this week, when the English government voted to take the statement of animal sentience out of UK law following Brexit. In fact, they've taken it out now with the promise that they're going to do something about it at some point and have an even better animal welfare policy. But anyway, there's this kind of this period at the moment where there's no animal welfare. So we have a situation, and say, take for example the UK. 10 million pigs are slaughtered in the UK every year. That's 10 million pigs who are living for 6 months prior to that slaughter in crates that they can't even turn round in, producing piglets, being fattened. None of the 5 freedoms are adhered to, and nothing can be done about it. Take chickens. They have something like 980 million chickens are slaughtered in the UK. In Ireland, 92 million chickens. That is an awful lot of death. But even before the death, where sentience comes in, if they're all going to agree it's okay to kill everybody, that's fine. But before even that slaughter takes place, there's some living to do, and that living, the quality of that living, is determined legally binding way by whether those welfare laws are really able to implement them, really able to enforce them. And we can't enforce welfare laws if there's no sentience there. So one example of that was the something like four of the very worst welfare breaches took place in Charles River Laboratory in Ireland. And when that closed down, it didn't close down because it was made to close down. It was basically, they were shown up, then these breaches were shown up, and then the research laboratory decided to move its operations to where there was less welfare legislation. So that is what I mean by a race to the bottom. England, Ireland are fighting to keep the trade, keep the big companies, keep the cruel companies. We're talking 4.5 million animals in research laboratories as we speak. Every single year, 4.5 million are killed. So that, I mean, some of that is in education, some of that is in product testing, some of that is in pharmaceutical testing, and it's again, just before the death, picture the life. This is what I really want people to take away today, is it's the quality of life that's at stake. And if there's no recognition that animals are have a right to a quality of life, and that it means anything to them, that they have an experience of their own, if that is taken out of law, it's unprosecutable. And we know that this is happening because in Ireland there was a massive increase in calls to the welfare helpline, animal welfare helpline, and yet there was an ever decreasing amount of prosecutions. I think there was only 2 prosecutions for animal cruelty, so that there's very little accountability, and all the accountability and all the parts of the jigsaw are picked up by charities. In England, something like a quarter, if not a third, of all giving, charitable giving, is to animal charities. They really love the animals here, and that is okay in itself, and hopefully it'll mean that the government will lose a huge amount of support from the public for this vote to take animal sentience out of law. But in the meantime, what it really means, it's a reinforcing of another pattern which is really a disaster, which is that government take no accountability, take no responsibility for the less well-off in society, including animals, and all the social problems are carried and supported and addressed by charitable organisations. So that puts the government just dealing with trade and facilitating the big pharmaceutical companies, the big food industries, all the big trade deals, make as much money out of anybody and anything as you can. And then all the good work, all the work that addresses what really needs to happen in society, only takes place through charitable donations and charitable organisations. And that is a very difficult division that is now taking over the whole world. So I would say that the 3 things that Ireland is and England are, they're both involved in this race to the bottom of just saying, please come and set up your massive, horrible organisation that is destroying the environment, animals, quality of life, and everything else for profit. Come to me, no, come to us, no, come to us. The other thing is the puppy farms. Both countries have the right or licenses to breed puppies only literally for use in research laboratories. So that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of beagle puppies going to just literally for testing. And quite aside from the other puppy farms where it's a free for all of neglect and a little bit of a profit there, and awful disasters that people know of in Ireland anyway, at least. And the English side of the market, who receive a lot of these puppies, they fall for it, thinking that they are a unique litter of puppies that have just arrived on the planet and they're going to home one, which is all very well and good, but everybody needs to be checking where those animals come from, or even possibly letting the ISPCA know, the RSPCA know, and just checking in with them. Are those puppies from a puppy farm? Because if so, don't do it. In Finland, for example, they no animals were allowed to be sold, no dogs were allowed to be sold at all, unless all the shelters are empty, which is a really nice policy. But I really want to impart on you, it's not about us. It's not about our part in this. This is about getting it back into law that the pharmaceutical companies, the product testing companies, the farms, and the slaughterhouses, and all those really massive dairy, all those massive food industries and testing industries, that they can't just do whatever they want with animals now, with no accountability and no enforceable law to suggest that those animals should have any quality of life or even mercy at any point in their lives. This is what's at risk. I know from conversations on the radio today that they're saying, oh no, the UK is going to replace these laws, omitting the sentience, they're going to replace it with something a whole lot better. But actually that's either ignorance or it is pressure from these big companies to keep it out and just say whatever they need to say to get it through. So fight it. Write to your local MP or TD and just say you want better deal for animals. It's outrageous that they can have no quality of life and no repercussions for that treatment of them on these massive large-scale businesses. So we're thinking puppy farms, research, live export, farming, intensification, and these 5 freedoms. Call me old-fashioned, but that the very least animals should have are the 5 freedoms to have a little bit of what they need in their very short and pretty miserable lifespans before their deaths. So that's the news today. I'm going to put a list here that was kindly shared with me of all those MPs that voted for the taking out of sentience, and just say to them, right, we need it back in, and we need a policy right now that's better than that, and be true to your word. That's the story. All the best.